Hi, I am David DeCosse. I'm in the staff of the Markla Center for Applied Ethics here at Santa Clara University. I also teach in the Religious Studies department, and I worked with Boo Riley of Religious Studies last spring to help host a reading group on Camus' Plague. And so my contribution to our effort here is to read a selection from the second part of the Plague, and I'll set that up a little bit more by saying this, that I'm a Catholic theologian, and it certainly is the case that Catholic theology has benefited immensely from critiques outside of theology, from its engagement with culture and philosophy outside of the tradition of the church. And that strikes me as very relevant to reading Camus. I think Camus' discussions of suffering, justice, death in the plague have a lot to say, especially to a contemporary Catholic response to our twin plagues of the pandemic and racism. So the short passage I'm going to read is a response primarily from the main character of the novel, Dr. Ryu, to a sermon that a Jesuit, Father Panalou, has just given in Oran on the plague. And in short, Father Panalou's sermon really emphasizes how the plague is the occasion for God's truth to be manifest to the people of Iran and to call and demand their transformation, their throwing themselves on God's mercy after having failed to do so for so long. So Panalou sets that up a bit more in the classic sense of the plague as a visitation, inviting this transformation toward God. And Panalou is asked what he thinks of that. And here is what he has to say. What did you think of Panalou's sermon, Doctor? The question was asked in a quite ordinary tone, and Ryu answered in the same tone. I've seen too much of hospitals to relish any idea of collective punishment. But as you know, Christians sometimes say that sort of thing without really thinking it. They're better than they seem. However, you think, like Father Panalou, that the plague has its good side. It opens men's eyes and forces them to take thought. The doctor tossed his head impatiently. So does every ill that flesh is heir to. What's true of all the evils in the world is true of plague as well. It helps men to rise above themselves. All the same, when you see the misery it brings, you need to be a madman or a coward or stone blind to give in tamely to the plague. Ryu had hardly raised his voice at all, but Taru made a slight gesture as if to calm him. He was smiling. Yes, Ryu shrugged his shoulders, but you haven't answered my question yet. Have you weighed the consequences? Taru squared his shoulders against the back of the chair, then moved his head forward into the light. Do you believe in God, Doctor? Again, the question was put in an ordinary tone, but this time Ryu took longer to find his answer. No, but what does that really mean? I'm fumbling in the dark, struggling to make something out, but I've long ceased finding that original. Isn't that it, the gulf between Panalou and you? I doubt it, Ryu responded. Panelu is a man of learning, a scholar. He hasn't come in contact with death. That's why he can speak with such assurance of the truth with a capital T. But every country priest who visits his parishioners and has heard a man gasping for breath on his deathbed thinks as I do. He'd try to relieve human suffering before trying to point out its excellence. I found that passage remarkably powerful in terms of Catholic theology, because I think it really points up to me something decisive and really difficult for the theological response to our twin pandemics. And that is the degree to which inequality has informed that response. And I think as it has informed it, it's prompted us, too many of us within Catholicism, to abstract ourselves, to think of truth with a capital T at the expense of the real agonies of the COVID-19 pandemic, at the expense of the engagement with the desire, the gasping for breath that really literally was the case with George Floyd, and that I see is the whole kind of force behind Black Lives Matter. We have to breathe, we have to live, we have to feel safe as we walk our streets in this country. I think our brother and sister Black Americans are telling us. So I think Ryu rightfully invites Catholic theological engagement with, we could say, death, with mortality, with the injustices that compel people to die too young, to die of illness when they shouldn't be dying of illness, to die of violence at the hands of the state when they should never be experiencing something of that nature. And that to me is where Catholic theology should stand, in that place of healing, in service to people's mortality, in that place prophetically in response to the injustices that compel people towards such suffering in the first place. So Camus and the Plague is, to me, an absolutely almost unimaginably brilliant work of imagination, if I can put it in those terms. I've been so grateful to hear from my colleagues in many different departments, their insights and thoughts on the book in our reading group. And I hope this brief reflection is in some way helpful to those who pass through and watch our brief presentation on this twin pandemics effort. And I'd also like to really thank the people who have pulled together this entire effort on the part of many at the university. Thank you so much.